Welcome to UCF Knightline, your source for UCF sports and former player information.
Hello, Night Nation. This is Andrew Phegley coming to you from the 1148 studios. This is episode number 65. With me, as always,
Trylko. Happy Night Year, everyone.
Or New Year.
Or New Year.
So this is episode number 65, and it is our first episode of the year 2016.
The show has now existed in 3 different years. Andrew.
Wow. That's 14? It's crazy.
15?
And it's 65. It's a milestone
It's one of those
episode.
that ends in 5. Yes.
Yeah. Every 5th show is a milestone. Hey, you got to come up with milestones whatever way you can get them as far as I'm concerned. So, there's a lot of nothing.
There's a lot of nothing
yeah.
going on, right? I mean,
is.
holidays and people traveling and enjoying time with their families, but not a lot of UCF news. That's sure to change here in the next couple of days, you'd think.
Yeah, we should be hearing about some staff now that all the bowls are over. The only thing left in college football now is the national championship game.
What do you think of that matchup?
It's going to be good. I mean, those two teams deserve to be there, obviously, with the way that they won their games. Michigan State had no reason to even be in the playoffs. I would have rather Iowa been in there.
Or Ohio State.
Iowa
got thrashed. How about Stanford? Stanford had a really good season.
Phil Steele was right when he said that Stanford was going to have a good season.
He may have been wrong on his prediction of UCF, but he was right about Stanford, as it turns out.
Yeah. It's interesting to go back. I want to go back through his magazine and look to see, really.
But Stanford, as you hit on, was one of the ones that he mentioned.
That was one of the ones that he was definitely saying was going to be up there, and I believe he said 6 at one point, and I think that's
sounds
where
about
they
right,
turned
doesn't
out.
it? Yeah.
So, that's interesting.
Well, they'll climb even a little bit more when the final poll rankings
Yeah, the
come
final
out.
poll hasn't come out. Well, that'll be interesting. But we should be seeing some coach movement here for UCF soon because all that stuff is over.
Oregon has lost its bowl game in epic fashion, and now some of those coaches and support staff can make the moves out.
I wish I would have taped that one. Maybe I can go back on ESPN.
Watch ESPN.
Yeah, watch ESPN and see or something, because the last time I looked at it, I think it was 31-6. And then I had to go to the airport to pick up my fiance and her daughter coming back into town. And then all of a sudden, I was at the airport. I looked up at the TV, 31-6. I'm like, okay, whatever. And then I get an alert on my phone, that ESPN alert thing that TCU had come back in, dramatic fashion, the biggest, tied for the biggest return ever, or, largest deficit, whatever, and come back and won. So that's absolutely insane.
Triple overtime game. TCU was without their quarterback, who was involved in the high-profile incident in a bar and fisticuffs with a police officer, but quite the rally back for TCU, and a little bit of a blemish on Oregon's season, certainly. You don't want to lose a bowl game like that.
I guess Scott Frost was at the Oregon game, but wearing UCF gear.
That's fine.
Yeah, that's awesome.
That's fine.
I mean, he was on their sideline, I guess, or the sidelines, walking around, talking to people. It's good for him. I mean, that's great. I think that's more than appropriate if he wanted to go there and do that. I'm glad that he wasn't coaching in it, personally.
Agreed. That game turned, and it just goes to show you how important a quarterback is when Oregon's quarterback, senior Vernon Adams Jr., got knocked out of that game. And as we begin to focus even more on UCF's football team as we approach signing day, spring game, you realize just how vitally important that quarterback position is at every level of football, and what it's going to mean for UCF in a new offensive scheme, and whether Justin Holman or someone else will win that starting job out of spring.
Later on, we're going to talk with Eric Lopez about a lot of these things. And I'm going to say something that I said in that. I was watching the Oregon game. I really tuned into it just to see, what... Because I haven't watched a lot of Oregon games. It's not one of the teams that I have picked out to watch every week because I know they score a lot of points and blah, blah, blah. But I had no reason to watch them. Well, now we have a little bit more of a reason to watch them. So I just wanted to look at what their personnel looked like, and it's much different than what we've got here at UCF currently. So I think it'll be interesting to see how long it takes us to get those types of players, and if we can get those types of players, and how well this whole system can work at UCF. I think it's going to be extremely interesting.
Those dates, signing day, spring game, seem so far away, but in reality, they're not
No.
very far away.
No.
And you think about all that has to happen between now and signing day, and then implementing a new scheme with essentially the existing players, right? So there's talent there, but they've got to learn new system.
Speaking of things that are going to happen between now and signing day, in 2 weeks from today, Sunday, January 17th, we will be having a live podcast, live on YouTube, taking your phone calls. Again.
You like that. Your voice you got a little excited about
It'll be awesome, yeah.
That was fun.
It's going to be cool, yeah. I think people enjoyed it. By the numbers anyway, people enjoyed it. And so, yeah, we'll do that. And then at some point, I know I've said that we were going to do a live, video type thing for signing day like we did that last year, actually, but we were going to do a little bit of a different one. We didn't do it live. We did a video thing for signing day. I think that was our first one, actually, but our first live video was a couple weeks ago with Kyle and Carson Engel, but we're going to do something like that again for signing day, and I'm just trying to work out the details on that, so follow Twitter and all that stuff, Facebook, and it'll be on our webpage, all that we'll figure out when we're going to do that. We've had conflicts of when people can do stuff and all that, so I've got to get that figured out. But we will have something.
How many Twitter followers now? What's the up-to-date
850 something.
Right,
so
getting
we're
in on
getting
900.
close to 900. Yes,
1,000 anytime now.
Hopefully, yeah. Tell your friends, and I haven't been very active on Twitter lately.
It's been a quiet time.
It has. We'll get it together. We'll get everything working again, and we talk about how hard this is to do with a team that lost, all 12 of their games. It's also hard to do when, in this type of a time period, the dead, part of recruiting. We have basketball to talk about, but that's really not the focus at UCF. For some, it may be, but for not a lot of people, I don't think. So we definitely can talk a little bit of basketball here. I've got some sound from Donnie Jones.
And by the way, we have lives and jobs and things as well.
Yeah.
Working it all together and making time to put out.
I just started a new job, which is going to put me on a different schedule, opposite from a lot of you. That is something that's a little bit different, but we'll still make this thing happen. It just may not be every week for a while. We may take a little bit of a breather here. And do maybe every other week for a time or something like that. We'll see. You'll just have to Twitter, I guess, and our Facebook page and the website would be the way to figure out if what we're gonna do. So we'll figure it out soon. I gotta honestly take just a few weeks here to get the schedule and everything worked out, and then I'll know a lot more.
That housekeeping aside.
Yeah, well, we needed to talk about that stuff. That stuff is important. People want to know what we're doing every week because, I think there's people that look forward to this, believe it or not.
It's the place that you can listen to hopefully intelligent conversation about UCF. Well,
it depends
where
on how
else
much
are you
I
talking
talk.
about it throughout the year?
Nowhere.
So
there's nowhere to talk about it as far as, there's message boards and stuff like that, but there's not a live.
That's a different kind of communication.
Live or, the radio type thing that's all UCF all the time. There's not anything. So it's good. It's a good thing. What else before we get to Eric Lopez?
Well, just a couple of notes for folks that have been out and about the holidays and have missed. Some former UCF coaches have moved on to, well, in the case of one, a good position, former UCF defensive coordinator Lance Thompson, who was here 2004 to 2006, going to be Will Muskamp's assistant head coach of defense and defensive line coach at South Carolina. So good job situation for him. However, as we see with new coach coming to UCF and there being changes in the coaching staff, that's going to be the case up at Rutgers. Defensive line coach Jim Panagos out as the Scarlet Knights defensive line coach. I think it's interesting the people on the message boards who want every coach that ever was here that they like to come back.
Yeah.
That's not how
when
it's going to work.
was he here?
Not that long, like a couple of 10 to 2009 to 12, 13, something like that.
Oh, really? Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, not that long ago.
Huh, interesting. All right, well, how about we talk to Eric Lopez?
Joining us to talk about UCF sports and the postseason in college football, the voice of UCF softball, local sports radio host at Sports Talk Florida, Eric Lopez. Eric, how you doing?
Doing great. Great to be with you guys once again.
Yeah, welcome back. It's been a little while since we talked to you, but we always love to have you on here. We appreciate you being on here. First of all, let's talk about the softball thing a little bit. What's going on? What's the upcoming season going to look like, and all that?
Well, the softball season will get underway in about a month. February 11th, the team will host Liberty at home. It's a tournament that weekend. They'll host Alabama, which will be a top 5 team on that Friday the 12th, and got some good teams, James Madison, and of course high expectations for head coach Renee Lourdes-Gillespie and her team. They return about 6-7 starters on offense. They return the All-American pitcher Shelby Tournier, and it's a team that's going to be the favorites to win the regular season title in the American for the 3rd time in a row. And they're going to be a top 20 preseason team, and there'll be high expectations. Very difficult schedule. It's a marquee schedule. Some of the best teams in the country are going to be playing UCF, both here in Orlando and as well as on the road. So, challenging schedule, but a team, I think they're looking forward to the challenge and try to duplicate what they did a season ago.
Well, duplicate what they did a season ago, but they want to go even farther, and they've really beefed up their schedule that will really prepare them for the long campaign.
They did, and part of the reason they did that is they felt they should have been a host to a regional, and they didn't get that opportunity. They got sent to Tallahassee, and arguably the toughest regional of the entire NCAA tournament, and they fell short. Tight regional to Florida State. And you're right. They want to go further than that. There's still a bad taste in the mouth of the veteran players here, and Shelby in particular, and I think they want to go past that, but I also think they have a bad taste from the fact they felt that the committee robbed them of hosting a regional. They were a top 16 RPI team. They won the regular season title. They won the conference tournament title, won 50 games, and they didn't get to host. They got sent to Florida State. They had to bus. It's a big difference, and I think you're right. Part of the message there is they're toughen up the schedule and try to get more quality wins against teams in the top 25 and send that message to the committee, because certainly with Florida and Florida State in the state and being as good as they are, they're both top 10 programs. It's stacked here in this state, and if you got an opportunity to host, you want to take advantage of that. And I think that's part of the reason why they toughen the schedule, and it also gets you ready for the postseason down the road. And that's part of the reason as well for that strategy. So now the question is, can the girls handle it? And I think they can.
How does the committee make those decisions of who hosts the regionals and stuff like that?
Well, that's a great question. I really have been very critical of the committee. If you follow me on the Twitter during the selection, I kind of went off on them. And to me, it's kind of the archaic thinking process. They picked Notre Dame, for example, over UCF. UCF has a better resume, but they went with Notre Dame because they could bust 3 teams to South Bend, Indiana, including a Kentucky, who ended up winning the regional. That's the problem, is they're still kind of picking teams from time to time they can bust 3 teams or 4 teams. My thing is the 16 teams that should host should be the 16 best teams in the country. It shouldn't come down to who can fit, save money. And that's what the NCAA did. That's what the committee did. They saved money. You look at college baseball as an example. They're able to have Miami, Florida, and Florida State host regionals in the same year. Why can't UCF, Florida, and Florida State host regionals? All you got to do is be a little bit more creative and think a little bit outside the box, and you can make it happen. Unfortunately, creativity and the committee does not really go hand in hand.
Do they, base things on facilities? I know, like in baseball, it's a lot about the facilities that the schools have. Is that one of their things that they take under consideration?
They do, but we have the UCF has the facilities to host a regional. I don't think that came down to that. I think it just came down to the fact that they picked a team like Notre Dame and James Madison that they found it was easier to put 3 teams in those locations, and they had the bus instead of flying out. The committees, they try to limit the flights to all these schools, but when I did my projections with UCF hosting, I only cost them like 2 extra flights. So And I think it's a cop-out. I think it was a slap in the face on the program, to be honest, that they didn't get the host. And they're certainly, I think that's part of the reason, to go back to your original point, why they stacked up in the regionals. They're playing Alabama at home. You got Auburn coming here on a midweek. Florida and Florida State are coming here this year. And then they're also going to Palm Springs to play in that Mary Nutter tournament, which is the premier tournament in college softball where all the marquee teams play. And they will play LSU, Arizona, Texas A&M, UCLA, and Washington. And I think it's a positive sign that it tells you that the program has arrived, that they're now respected by the rest of the sport.
All UCF can do is go out and win those games. And that's the same point that fans of UCF would say about the American Conference teams in the postseason. And they dropped the ball pretty much, didn't they? I mean, 2-6 overall. You hang your hat on Houston beating Florida State in the Peach Bowl, but the rest of it, just a mess.
Yeah, it was disappointing after such a fantastic regular season for them. To go 2-6 is definitely disappointing. I think they were expecting better than that. Now, having said that, the good news is they got the biggest win of them all, which was Houston beating Florida State in the Peach Bowl. That's huge, because now Mike Oresco can say that 2 of the last 3 seasons, the American Conference has won in a big bowl game against a Power 5 school. UCF did that in 2013, beating Baylor, and now Houston's beating Florida State. So that's a significant win. Let's not shortchange that. But you're right. Other than that, it was a big disappointment. The other win was Navy beating Pittsburgh. That was expected. Yeah, there was a couple of disappointments otherwise. In particular, Temple losing to Toledo and Boca Raton in the monsoon. That was probably a big disappointment. Temple was a team that was a top 25 team all year long and struggled. And then Memphis, a team that Paxton Lynch, just a terrible performance against Auburn, a mediocre Auburn team in the Birmingham Bowl. I think those are the 2 losses to me that are disappointing. The other ones I don't think were that big of a surprise.
Does it diminish the impact that the American had throughout the regular season with several teams ranked at various points during the season and feel-good stories in Temple and Memphis? Does this postseason letdown diminish that, or does it position the overall season, position the American to, keep putting pressure on that, Power 5 as a strong conference?
I don't think the 2-6 diminishes it because Houston won. See, had Houston gotten blown out by Florida State, then Trace, I think you would have had a more legitimate argument to say, wow, that really kind of takes away from the regular season. But the fact that Houston beat Florida State in that big of a stage, I think helps it. And, bowl games are such a crapshoot that a lot of it depends on matchups and circumstances. And, for example, Tulsa played Virginia Tech in Frank Beamer's last football game as a head coach at Virginia Tech. A lot of emotions there, and that Tulsa gave it all they could. It was a 55-52 game. So I don't know if that basis, affects the bowl season. The Memphis one's disappointing because you lost to a mediocre Auburn team. I think that's the one where perhaps you have a bit of a disappointment. But look, South Florida, for example, losing to Western Kentucky, which, let's be honest, we're not real disappointed that occurred.
Not at all.
But Western Kentucky's a really good football team. They're a top 25 caliber team. They have a great quarterback in Daltrey that people found out. They won Conference USA. I wasn't surprised by that result at all. So, no, I think still if you're the American Conference and you're Mike Oresco, I think what your statement is we are, without question, at worst, the 6th best conference in the country in football. We can compete with anybody, and we've shown that with Memphis beating Ole Miss, who, by the way, won the Sugar Bowl pretty handily during the regular season. You have Houston now knocking off Florida State. You have a UCF program that 2 years ago knocked off Baylor. So they've got quality wins there, and I think the American Conference, in my opinion, has separated itself from the Mountain West, from Conference USA, from the MAC, and those conferences. And to me, should be always the conference champion of the American should be the favorites to go to a big bowl, one of those New Year's Day 6 bowl games.
I think that you could definitely back that last comment up, separating themselves from the Mountain West and the MAC and the rest of them. If you look at the last regular season poll, does it take anything away from the Houston victory over Florida State because their quarterback didn't play that final game?
Sean McGuire started for Florida State. He's been the starter of the last handful of games. I don't think he's very good. Some people will say, and it's, was Florida State motivated for the game or not? That's certainly a question there. Florida State, the last couple seasons, have been playing in national title game implication games. This year they were not. But, I think anybody that followed Houston, and I said this on the radio show on the airwaves before the game was announced, that Florida State better be ready to play or Houston would take it to them. And they did, and I thought Houston had a great game plan. They took Dalvin Cook away from the game, and they forced Florida State to beat them with the passing game. Todd Orlando, the defensive coordinator for Houston, put pressure on Florida State, brought pressure, and really Florida State didn't have an answer for that. And Greg Ward Jr. was fantastic. He played a magnificent game. And Houston is a team that I've been very high on. We all saw them in person against UCF. I know it was not an enjoyable game from a UCF perspective, but if you watched Houston in person, you cannot deny the fact they're a well-coached team, and they're a talented team, and they're athletic. And they're a legitimate top 15, top 20 team. And remember this, they return 15 starters from this team next year, including Greg Ward Jr. So they're going to be the favorites again in the American Conference. And I think they will open the season with Oklahoma. And if they were to upset Oklahoma in that opener, they're going to be a team that's going to be in a lot of people's conversations throughout the year.
No doubt they might be flirting with a preseason top 25 ranking, considering the season that they've just had and beating Florida State. You'd like to see them in that top 25 preseason poll.
Oh, there's no doubt. I don't think there's any doubt. I think they will be a top 20 preseason poll team. They return, like I said, 15 starters. And remember, Tom Herman in this current recruiting class is projected to have a top 30 recruiting class, which is phenomenal. So he's got the wheels in motion right now in Houston. Tom Herman right now is the hottest coach in the country as far as the group of 5 coaches, and Houston's benefiting from it, and they're going to be the favorites next year. How do they handle the expectations of being the favorite? That'll certainly be the question. But if you ask me today about the American Conference in 2016, I think Houston's a big favorite. Just keep this in mind. Memphis will lose Paxton Lynch. They also lose, of course, Justin Fuente, their head coach, who moves on to Virginia Tech. You look at a team like Navy, they lose Keenan Reynolds, who graduates. So who's going to challenge Houston on the West? It's maybe Tulsa, who certainly improved offensively, but they've got questions on the defensive side. And I think Houston's going to be stronger than they even were this season. So I think Houston, at least on the West, and maybe in the entire conference, will be the favorites going in.
Boy, the tides have definitely changed in the American. A couple of years ago, it was us that they were looking, after to emulate and to be like and to try to, to beat. Now it's Houston. What does UCF and the other teams in the American have to do to keep up with Houston?
Well, I think they got to start with recruiting and certainly catch up with them recruiting and get the better athletes and keep up with their tempo and play defense. So much focus on the offense, but if you look at Houston in the Temple game when they won the American Conference title and even the Florida State game, they forced a lot of turnovers. They played well defensively, and they got better as the year went on. And I think that's something that certainly all the teams will see. I think, you look at the East, unfortunately, I would have to say that South Florida is probably going to be the favorites in the preseason, but I think they have some questions. How much of this was a mirage? Can Quentin Flowers improve in his passing game? How does South Florida handle having high expectations? They came under the radar this year. Cincinnati always gets a lot of high expectations. We haven't even talked about the reason we didn't talk about their bowl game is because they didn't show up in Hawaii. So
that's probably the most disappointing bowl loss, isn't it, that they, as you say, didn't even show up?
That game was over real quick. I agree with you. It is very disappointing. And I think it begs to ask a lot of questions about Tommy Tuberville's future at Cincinnati. I think he's on the hot seat going into next season for Cincinnati. That program, you could argue, is underachieved. Keep in mind, they were the preseason favorites in the conference this season. Didn't come close to that. They annually get picked at the top of the conference, and they don't succeed. And they have good talent, but they just don't put it together. So I agree with you. I think Cincinnati was a huge disappointment in that Hawaii Bowl, just no-showed that game. And I think Tommy Tuberville, you wonder if they have another mediocre season next year, that he might be out the door if you're Cincinnati, because there's a lot of pressure there to be successful, because, you never know what the future of realignment and things like that. So I think Cincinnati, Tommy Tuberville, as far as the conference is concerned, is under the biggest hot seat going into 2016.
Yeah, well, we're talking about playing defense here in the American, and we don't even have a defensive coordinator. Have you heard anything, any rumors? What do we, it's kind of unsettling to me that we haven't shored up a defensive coordinator yet. I'm hoping maybe tomorrow something would happen on that, just because these bowl games are over.
I tend to agree with you. I think you're going to start hearing the hires in the next 2 to 3 days, I would like to think. The only name I've heard really is the linebacker coach at Oregon that might come here to be the defensive coordinator. But that's been hush-hush. Scott Frost and that staff if we've have kept everything on the hush. Nobody has gotten any links. Nobody has heard any rumors. They've done a good job of keeping things hush-hush, and I think it's something that UCF fans will have to get used to, because that's kind of how it was at Oregon, where they kept everything under the radar, and they would make these really nobody. They kind of kept things under wraps, and I think that's going to be the same here under Scott Frost and company. But with the bowl games here wrapping up, I would expect some of those announcements to be made this week. I would be surprised if by the end of this week we don't have a pretty good idea who your coordinators are and who's going to be on this staff. Because I think now with the bowl games being done, you'll start getting, now that the obligations are done, and whoever gets hired will accept and publicly get the jobs.
UCF getting a little free publicity with Scott Frost roaming the sidelines during the Alamo Bowl, sporting his UCF gear. Closing the chapter, really, for him now with Oregon, seeing that bowl game, and not that he hasn't given his attention, but there's been transition, certainly having to move and such. As a new year begins, it's all UCF all the time for Scott Frost.
Oh, there's no question. And, Andrew brought it up. It starts with the staff. Who's going to be the defensive coordinator? Who's going to be the offensive coordinator? We really don't know that yet either. Will guys like Sean Beckton be retained, and if so, at what position? And then certainly in January, as we get later in January, the recruiting period will open up again, and it's trying to kind of finish strong on this recruiting class and try to build a football team for 2016. And I think there's certainly a lot of questions. For example, on this recruiting class, is there going to be a quarterback? And if so, is that going to be the quarterback that could be the starter at UCF for 2016 as we look ahead toward the spring game? I think that's going to be the number one question on everybody's mind, is who's going to be the quarterback under this system? Will it be somebody on the roster right now? I would say probably not, unless you would say that Justin Holman maybe could fit into that system, or does he bring in somebody, whether it be a true freshman or a JUCO transfer, into this recruiting class? I think that's going to be so fascinating, guys, because I think there's going to be a lot of new faces, and I think there's going to be some changes on the roster from that standpoint as far as who's starting, and which you would expect with a different scheme than we've had before. You go from a pro-style offense, basically, to now this Oregon spread offense.
I think that is going to be interesting, because if you watch that Oregon game the other night, and I tried to watch it a little bit and just look at the types of players they have, the size of players they have, it's obvious that they like small running backs, and we have recruited one for next year from the guy from Daytona. He's a small guy. Their offensive linemen aren't big fat guys. They're buffed out, like, kind of smaller offensive linemen than a lot of teams. It's going to be definitely a different group of people than you've seen at UCF, I believe. I'm wondering who's going to fit in and how well they're going to fit in, and that's going to be the exciting thing as far as I'm concerned, with the off season.
Oh, no question. I think you hit it in the head 100%. You're right. I think you're going to see different style players. They haven't really hide what their philosophy is, and that's fast. They want fast athletes.
And that's everybody fast. That's not just the position players. That's everybody needs to be fast and play. Yep. Like the linemen have to play all of them. Not just one or two of them, but all of them have to play the entire play until the whistle blows. So, that is going to be something that's going to be exciting, because we're going to have a completely different offensive line at some point. And that's what makes it. And we really have issues here at offensive line. So, that's something that's got to improve immediately.
It definitely has to. It'll be interesting how long does it take, though. Does it take them a year to get everybody in? I don't know if this is a quick fix. I think there's going to be a transition period here. But you're right. They're going to be recruiting some fast guys, and I think he'll be able to draw some attractive guys at the beginning, because guys will be excited to play that offense, and certainly maybe opens the doors to some guys that maybe they wouldn't have had a chance to get before. But, that's going to be the question on offense. And then defensively, what's going to be the philosophy? We've talked about it. Who's going to be the defensive coordinator? What kind of scheme are they going to run? I think there's so many interesting questions that certainly people are going to be interested. I think the spring game, I don't know if you guys agree with me on this, I think this will be one of the more interesting anticipated spring games at UCF football that a lot of people kind of remember, because it's something new, and I think that'll be the first time they'll get to see Scott Frost, and they get to see this new coaching staff and see what this new system is all about, at least get a taste of it.
We started by talking about 8 of 12 American teams in bowl games. For sake of this, let's talk that there will be the 40 games again, and 2/3 of the league will make a postseason appearance. Is it unrealistic, first weekend in January, for UCF fans to say, we can go to one of those 40 bowl games? We can be one of those 8 schools in postseason that gets those extra practices, that gets that extra preparation. Is that unrealistic in this first weekend of January to think that UCF can be one of those 8 schools going to a bowl?
Not necessarily when you consider that you had some teams going at 5 and 7 into a bowl game this season. So, I mean, is it crazy to think this team can go to 6 and 6? No, I don't. You look at the schedule, it's very difficult. They open at home at South Carolina State. You like to think they can start off with a win, which is, first of all, let's just start with a win, right? I mean, something we did not experience in 2015. But then after that, you go to Michigan and you host Maryland. That'll be tough. They have to go to Houston. They have to go to South Florida on the schedule. That'll be tricky. But certainly the UCF could sneak up on some teams. And let's not act like this team is, limited on talent. I think there's still some talent on this roster that you can win with, in particular in the wide receiving core. I think is in good shape with Trylko Smith. The question obviously is, does Jordan Aiken come back, or what's he going to look like if he's healthy or close to it? But there's some pieces they can work with. I think 6 wins is definitely something they could shoot for, but I don't see this team as a conference division contender right away, because I do think there's going to be a transition period with this new scheme, with the new coaching staff. Some of the players that doesn't really probably fit the system are still going to be on this roster. So I don't know if there's much more expectations than that. I don't think there should be more expectations than maybe 5-6 wins at best. And just got to be patient with it, because I don't think this is something that's a 1 year rebuild, 1 year that you can just fix.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a little bit longer than 1 year, unfortunately. But, we need to start off with just winning one game before we, even think about the rest of that stuff.
Yeah.
It would be nice. But then, the other thing is, I think the biggest thing that we're going to find out once we see what's going on is what kind of a coach and how good of a head coach Scott Frost is going to be, and what kind of a staff that he can put together to make these players go out there and play and give it their all, no matter what the score is. I think a lot of these kids gave up after the Furman game, to be honest with you. It was never the same. It was never going to be the same after that game. So I think that's what we're going to see. We're going to have to see, if he can coach these players up that are going to stick around, and to give it their all.
Yeah, I agree. And look, I would not be surprised between now and the fall that there'll be some other players that either transfer or just leave the program in general, just because, look, this is not their coach. This is not who they came to play for. They don't fit in here. I mean, we saw that when George O'Leary arrived here back in 2004. I'm sure Kyle, who you've had on many a times, could tell you more about it. There were guys that just left the program either because they were just they weren't cutting it, or they just didn't want to be a part of it. They just couldn't handle it. So I think there'll be some of that still going on. But I do think that for the most part, especially on offense, the good news is this. You're at rock bottom, right? It can't get any worse.
That's
so
true.
That's really the way to look at it. I mean, this was a team that was the worst offense in college football, and it was one of the worst defenses in college football. So there's nowhere to go up but literally up.
Yeah. Well, we will see. We will definitely see. Eric, thank you so much for joining us. Tell everybody how they can reach you on social media and they can hear you during the week talking on the radio.
Well, you can follow me on Twitter at Eric Lopez Elo. That's where you can find me with all the latest news. And, of course, for UCF softball fans, can follow me there. We'll be announcing, certainly getting all the details there as we get closer to the season. February 11th, UCF hosts Liberty. And you also write for Orlando Magic Daily, kind of a contributor there on OrlandoMagicDaily.com. And you can listen to me on Sports Talk 1080 The Team Saturday mornings, 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. And also this January we'll be on from Harry Buffalo an hour before the NFL playoff games. We will be on an hour before that first Sunday playoff game live from Harry Buffalo. So you want to keep it on Twitter and Eric Lopez Elo for all the details on that in the month of January as the NFL playoffs will get going. So lots of busy time, but certainly a fun time, gentlemen. And, of course, always a pleasure to be on with the two of you. You guys continue to do a great job.
Well, thank you very much. We always appreciate you being on here, and you give us great insight, and we appreciate that.
Anytime, guys.
All right, so that was our discussion with Eric Lopez. Always awesome to have him on. I really like that guy. Knights in the NFL. Let's talk a little bit about that.
Regular season's over.
Yeah.
We're coming to an end,
almost,
right?
Yeah. As we're recording this, we're a little earlier today recording, so the late games, the 4 o'clock games are still going on. We are currently watching the Tampa Bay Bucks play the Carolina Panthers, And we're also watching the NFL Red Zone thing that goes through all of them, which if you look at the Kansas City course, Kansas City, I'll always talk about Kansas City, but if you
They're on quite a roll.
They are. If you look at that game, we've got 2 UCF players in there, and I was just looking at something on UCF's website, and they said that Oakland Raiders player Latavius Murray became the first Knight in school history to record at least 1,000 rushing yards in the NFL in a single season, and ranks 4th in the league when this was posted. I didn't realize, we talked about this a little bit off air, that Kevin Smith never had a 1,000-yard rushing season. His best one was like 976 or something. I didn't realize that. I thought he had one. Congratulations to Latavius Murray for making 1,000 yards a couple of weeks ago, because that's huge for him and for UCF. That's awesome. But Ja Reed is also in the Kansas City-Oakland game. And
with a new 3-year contract recently signed by
awesome.
Ja Reed.
Yeah, and of course, we talked a little bit, I think last time that we did a show, last episode, about J.J. Wharton going to St. Louis on their practice squad. We got a couple guys that are going to be in the Pro Bowl, Brandon Marshall and Josh Sitton.
Brandon Marshall with a touchdown, 100-yard plus game this Sunday. But the Jets knocked out. They will not be going to the postseason. So no postseason play for Brandon Marshall. Bills beat them, which advances Pittsburgh into the playoffs.
Ja Reed will definitely be in the playoffs with Kansas City.
Josh Sitton will be in the playoffs.
Cool. Hopefully those guys in the off season that are on the practice squads and stuff can get their work done and make it onto some rosters. It takes a couple of years sometimes for these guys. A.J. Boye with the Houston Texans will be in the playoffs.
They've clinched the AFC South.
Yeah. Who else? Josh Sitton we talked about. Ja Reed.
Blake Bortles will not be going to postseason, but set a couple of records on Sunday. New team record, most passing yards in a season, and also had most completions in a season. Well, statistically very valuable. A friend of mine had Latavius Murray, and Brandon Marshall on his fantasy football team, and advanced to his fantasy football title game. So that's pretty good.
Obviously a UCF fan there.
Yeah, you can almost fill out a roster. Fantasy football roster with UCF players.
We're getting there.
Almost.
And it's hard, like we've said, it's sometimes hard to be watching, a bunch of NFL games and not to have somebody on there. Getting back to Blake, I think that's pretty good for him to have done what he's done. I mean, it's still not perfect there.
He threw another pick six today.
The team that's around him is not perfect. He's not perfect, but he's making great strides.
They need more pieces there.
Jacksonville has had some very good quarterbacks over time. Gerard.
Mark Brunell.
Brunell before him. I mean, those guys, for Blake to be, eclipsing their records, that's impressive as far as I'm concerned. I still say put Blake, after his rookie contract runs out, onto a good team somewhere where a quarterback may be retiring or whatever, and let him run with it, and he wins the Super Bowl, as far as I'm concerned.
Wow, that's a bold proclamation.
I think that will happen one day for Blake. I think he will be a Super Bowl winning quarterback, and hopefully Murray can go someplace else as well, besides the dreaded Raiders. And maybe he can win a Super Bowl, too, because he's not going to win one with the Raiders. I can guarantee that.
So I'm looking up Blake's final. I mean, he statistically was just a really great fantasy football quarterback. 338 of 574, so his completion percentage, 58.9. 35 touchdowns, 16 interceptions, sacked 43 times.
Yeah. Well, that's hard to do when you're sacked 43 times. But if you look at this year versus last year with him, a huge improvement it was made in the offseason. So you can only expect for it to even get better next year.
And I was talking about Kevin Smith not having had a 1,000-yard rushing season in the NFL, and Murray being the first. Jacksonville's leading rusher, 740 yards, T.J. Yeldon. That's just not going to. I mean, when Blake is number 2 rushing on the team. 310 yards. He's not exactly fleet of foot.
Whatever happened to that guy from Michigan that Jacksonville had as a running back? The little guy.
Denard Robinson.
Yeah, whatever happened to Denard Robinson?
He had 62 carries, 257 yards.
Jeez. I think they screwed up in that situation. They should have just let him.
I mean, they've got some pieces, but not enough. I mean, I think he was sacked 6 times in the final game here.
Gus Bradley's coming back next year,
which is surprising for a team with 5 wins.
It is, but I think that they must really believe in what he's doing. He's trying to do it the right way, I think. I'm glad that they're going to give him another chance, but, they need to do something. They need to get some players. They just have to build a team around the guys they have, and they can win some games. Whatever, but that's enough of
So
talking
we'll
about
get to see
Jacksonville.
some UCF players in the postseason in the NFL.
Absolutely,
and as
in
you
the Pro
say,
Bowl.
you can't watch a game now without a notice of a UCF guy, so naturally that there'll be some in the playoffs. You talk about building the right team around all basketball season and the non-conference season, and going into this season, we've been talking about men's basketball. Donnie Jones has finally got the right pieces in place. 6-5, Mark, in the non-con schedule. Disappointing loss, their last one to George Washington. They lost by 17. They were down only by a couple at half, but they start out the AAC season in good fashion, winning on the road at East Carolina, now 1-0, and the hated Cows come to town on Wednesday.
Well, 6-5 is better than 5-6.
Well, this is true.
I mean, honestly, that's a win for Donnie Jones right there, as far as I'm concerned.
Our expectations have changed.
I think that Donnie Jones better get it together, and he's lucky. I think he's very, very lucky that they won this game against ECU, or the light was probably blinking for him to pack his bags. I don't know yet if that was, but I think it's getting pretty close. I think, I don't know if it's going to be the end of the basketball season or it's going to happen before that, but I don't think that you're going to see Donnie Jones unless something miraculously happens with this team around next year. That's my...
At the game the other night, the group I sit with, we were talking about how many wins Donnie needed. And everybody, the group of 4 here, a minimum of 9 in conference play. But even then, with this new athletic director, former basketball player, and the pedigree of the family, everything we've talked about, it just doesn't seem like 9 is even going to cut it. My buddy Bob said 12, and a win in the first round of the AAC tournament here in Orlando in March.
Well, you're going to look pretty stupid if you don't do good in your backyard.
So to talk about that they would need 12 wins, it'd be 12-6 mark in the AAC. That's his take on it. You got to think from 5 wins, 5-13 last season, you see some improvement. This is a better team, but boy, there are times where they don't play like a better team, and they came out flat in the second half. They couldn't shoot a 3 at all. Big 15-2 run by East Carolina. Suddenly they're down 10, but I'll give them credit. A.J. Davis with 19 points in the second half. They rallied back in a game that if you're going to be taken seriously in conference, you've got to win on the road at East Carolina, and UCF has struggled of late with East Carolina.
Well, they've pulled it out, and that's what needed to happen. I think that, like I said, if he would have lost that game, I don't think that would have been good. I think that would have maybe made Danny White's decision, maybe the decision's already made. You never know. But let's hear from Donnie Jones post the ECU game.
Well, I'm really proud that we did rally, and I think that was the big message, after the way we finished the game last game, and we've learned. I thought our practices were good the last 3 days. I thought our guys come out. We turned it over a lot. I thought we got off to a bad first 8 minutes in that second half, and we got down, but no one tucked their heads. We talked in the huddle, and I kept saying it's our turn to make a run. They made the run. We got to get back in. I thought I was looking for a rotation there. They're undersized as well. So we went small, and we worked on that in practice last couple days, being a more quicker, athletic lineup where we could switch all the screens and be able to space out and drive. And I thought we did a really good job making plays, sharing the ball, and making big free throws down the stretch.
So, you know what they say, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. We don't need to know about your fun-filled weekend in the City of Sin, but we hope you'll click the ad on our website. It's right there to the left, the one that screams you have to save up to 50% off your next trip to Vegas. Just click on the ad and we promise never to talk about what happened in Vegas.
So UCF's got the home game against South Florida Wednesday at 7, then on the road at Tulsa. That's their next 2 games of the week's games 2 and 3 in the American. Busy slate so far in the AAC. SMU Houston off to 2-0 starts, Andrew. Tulsa, Tulane, and the Cows 0-2. And I like to make fun of South Florida, of course, but I will give them their due here. 32nd strength of schedule for their non-con slate. They struggled in that 3-10 or 3-11, something like that. They struggled, but a strong schedule. So,
are they known for having a basketball team over there?
No.
I mean, have they ever been known for their basketball?
A couple years ago, they made an NCAA appearance. But,
really?
They've been struggling a little bit.
Okay,
late.
well, I don't care as long as we beat them in all sports. That's all I really care
when
about.
you look at the schedule and you try and figure out if there's a path to those 9, 10, 11, 12 wins, this is one of those games that you need to win at home.
Well, that's coming up, so we will see. And now, news and notes from the world of UCF sports.
This might also be known as the hot seat report. Women's basketball drops the American opener at home, losing to Cincinnati 68-50, combined with Wednesday's 74-55 loss to Florida. The Knights now 3-9. Up next Tuesday night at 7 over at that Tampa school.
Switching to baseball, sophomore right-handed pitcher Cree Frinfrock named the American preseason all-conference team. Meantime, UCF predicted for 6 out of 8 schools by the league's coaches.
Preseason predictions don't mean anything, but I can't imagine new athletic director Danny White is going to be satisfied with a women's basketball team that's 3-9, getting blown out at home to Cincinnati, and a baseball team projected 6 out of 8.
Yeah.
That's not the standard that he had established at Buffalo, where he wants teams contending for conference titles, and those two right there. Preseason predictions don't mean anything, but 6 out of 8 ain't going to cut it.
I still say that Rooney's going to be on the hot seat if something doesn't happen this year for baseball.
At the game the other day, I asked my group, Joy Williams, women's basketball, Terry Rooney, Donnie Jones, a year from now, as we end 2016, will all 3 still be employed? And a lot of heads shaking no.
Yeah, I don't think so at all. So, and that's good. We need to have winners all the way around in all sports at UCF. It'll make our jobs easier, and it'll be a lot better. All right, well, this has been episode number 65. I'm Andrew Phegley.
I'm Trace Trylko. Go Knights.
Charge on.
UCF, charge on to the field. With our spirits, we'll never yield. Black and gold, charge right through the line. Victory is our cry. B-S-E-T-O-R-Y.